Hi, I'm Nick from Australiannativebee, and today's video is going to be on bee psychology. This is something that I've wanted to talk about for some time because learning to read bees and the way they think will help you as a beekeeper to make decisions as to what to do with your stingless bees. So I'll go in and we'll explain a few things about bee psychology.
Through these days, songs that I've sung with the
Alright, let's have a look at how messages are sent within the bee's body, throughout its body, and its response to that. So basically a bee has a brain, it has a nerve cord that runs down, and on the nerve cord it's got thickenings in that nerve cord. Now inside those thickenings we have neurons, and the neurons have little feet, and all those feet touch. Now a neuron has a large foot, and it also has these little feet that come off it. Those little feet are called dendrites. So basically when a bee receives a message, a signal runs down the nerve cord, and we have what's called an input neuron, and those input neurons touch on feet, on the other neurons' feet, and send messages throughout to let the bee know what's going on. The neuron cell membrane is positively charged, and when a message comes in, that positive charge turns from positive to negative, and that's called depolarization. And the bee, depending on the strength of that electrical signal, will react according to it. So when the bee is, somebody's fiddling with the hive, that's obviously going to be a strong electrical impulse that runs through the bee, and the bee will react according so. So let's talk about some of the psychological modes, I guess you could call them, or electrical impulses that the bees work off. So these are some of the modes that I'm aware of when I'm working with bees, and so what I've got here is pollen collecting and nectar collecting. They sort of go hand in hand. When a bee leaves a colony, it's thinking pollen and nectar. So they kind of go hand in hand. Attack and defense also go hand in hand, and colonizing and construction, that's a particular mode bees go into. Why this is important to look at these different modes is they pair in some ways. Now, if you were to group these different modes, and you're able to read what a bee is thinking, you can do lots of things with your bees. For instance, if I see bees that are pollen and nectar collecting, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to get those bees to colonize and move into a box. They're already in a mode, and you can't do anything about that. If the bees are attacking or defending, to ask the bee to go into a pollen mode or even a nectar collecting mode is near impossible. The bee has received a message, and that's what it's doing. So let me give you some examples of how this can be useful for you as a beekeeper. Here's some bees that are in a searching mode. They're moving up and down the tree, they're looking for any sort of hole or crevice, and at the base of the tree they're sort of clustering around. They've been here for 2 weeks. I was able to help the bees move out of a searching mode into a colonizing mode just by using some honey and pollen pots in a hive so they knew where home was. Here you can see the bees' electrical signals or mode has changed. The bees are not spread out, they're in a tight ball, and they're all facing the same way and moving into the hive. So something's changed there. Here's what that colony looks like now. They're laying brood and collecting honey and pollen. Here's a little experiment I set up today that I thought everyone would find interesting, and that is how to pull bees out of a fighting swarm. So I put two strange hives next to each other, and a fighting swarm was triggered. Now, most people think these swarms are territorial, and some of them are, but this swarm is to do with two hives that look very similar to each other, and the bees are strange. So what I've done is I've stuck a soccer ball on one side of one hive, and I've stuck a bag with grapes on the other, and that's providing the bees with a visual so that they can tell the two hives apart. This is roughly 2 hours later, and there's still swarming going on, and 3 hours later, no swarming going on. So this is just about learning to read what mode a bee is in and how to change that mode to get the bee to do what you want it to do. So my last example is that I wanted to move a bunch of hives up here on the plank, and I wanted to do it all in one go. So this raises the question of the foragers left behind from where the hives were. This is where the hives were, here and also up on a plank next to it. So what I did is I put 2 weak colonies here. I left the bees looking for their hives for a day so they lose some of their smell. And now they're going into these 2 weak colonies and joining with them. So that was just 3 very quick examples of modes and their solution. But what I want to say is there are many different types of swarms and things that bees do, and it's up to you as a beekeeper to figure out what mode your bees are in and how you can help them as a beekeeper. So I hope this is inspirational in some ways and gets people to think outside the box with how they work with their bees.